The hospital room was silent, except for the soft cries of newborns. Michael Turner stared at the two tiny faces resting in his arms, his daughters Hannah and Grace. They were perfect. His heart swelled with love and wonder. Emily, his wife, lay motionless in the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. Michael thought it was exhaustion. He couldn't have been more wrong. 3 days later, Michael came home from picking up diapers to an empty apartment. The crib stood untouched. Clothes were gone. On the kitchen table, only a single cold cup of coffee remained. Panic surged through his chest. He called Emily's phone, straight to voicemail. He checked with friends, neighbors. No one had seen her. As the hours stretched into days, the reality crushed him. Emily had vanished, abandoning him and their newborn daughters. With no family nearby, no savings, and no clue where to turn, Michael faced the unbearable truth. He was now a single father with two fragile lives depending on him. The Chicago streets loomed outside the window, cold, unforgiving. As dusk fell, Michael bundled his daughters and stepped out into the unknown. The wind tore through Chicago's streets like icy knives. Michael hunched over, shielding the tiny bundles strapped against his chest with a frayed blanket. Hannah whimpered softly. Grace, exhausted, slept fitfully. Michael's fingers were numb, his stomach hollow, but he pressed on. There was no choice. Day after day, Michael walked the endless streets. Doorways became shelters. Storefronts provided fleeting warmth. People passed by without a glance. The homeless man carrying 2 babies was just another ghost in the city. A suited businessman flicked a coin his way. A woman hurried her children across the street to avoid him. Michael's pride burned, but survival came first. He found a quiet alley behind a bakery where the smell of warm bread tormented his empty belly. He fed the twins formula from a cracked bottle and whispered promises into the darkness. "You'll be safe. I swear it." Somewhere far across the city, Emily laughed over dinner with Ethan, the wealthy lawyer she had left them for. She had escaped what she called a life of struggle. Michael rocked his daughters under the flicker of a dying street lamp. The streets had taken everything, but they would not take his daughters. Not now, not ever. The rain came without mercy that night. Michael stood under a crumbling awning, soaked and shivering, as the twins whimpered beneath his thin coat. His legs ached from exhaustion, but he dared not sit. The streets were no place to rest. Then came the voice. "Sir, are those your babies?" Michael spun around to see an elderly woman, umbrella in hand, eyes wide with shock and concern. Her name was Margaret, a widow who had lived her entire life in the city. Something about the young man's gaunt face and the fragile babies in his arms tore at her heart. I have nowhere to go," Michael whispered hoarsely. Margaret didn't hesitate. "Come with me." She led him to her tiny basement flat. It was modest, worn by time, but warm and dry. Michael stared at the couch and the simple blankets as though they were treasures. For the first time in weeks, the twins slept peacefully. Margaret made tea and sat beside him. "I've lost everything before, too," she said gently. Tears streamed silently down Michael's cheeks. He had found shelter, if only for a moment. Far away, Emily clinked champagne glasses with Ethan, unaware her past was about to catch up. News travels fast, even through the cracks of a big city. One day, Emily appeared at Margaret's door, dressed in expensive clothes, eyes blazing with cold entitlement. Ethan had left her for someone younger. Her glamorous life had crumbled overnight. "I want my daughters back," she demanded, pushing past Michael. Michael stood frozen, clutching Hannah and Grace protectively. When the police arrived, they had no choice but to hand the twins over. Emily was still their legal mother. Emily, smug and victorious, left in a shiny black car with the crying girls buckled into the back seat. The next weeks were a nightmare. Michael's heart broke as he walked out of the courthouse. Empty-handed, Michael sat alone on the courthouse steps, staring into the distance as winter winds bit at his skin. But even in the darkest moment, he whispered to himself, "I will not give up." With no job and no home, Michael set out to reclaim what mattered most, which are Hannah and Grace. Michael worked like a man possessed. By day, he cleaned alleys, unloaded delivery trucks, fixed anything for a few dollars. By night, he slept on church floors or shelters, saving every penny. Margaret, always by his side, encouraged him. "You're their father. They need you." Meanwhile, Emily grew reckless. Her focus was no longer her daughters but chasing wealthy suitors and wild parties. Neighbors whispered. The once vibrant twins grew pale and withdrawn under Emily's cold care. An anonymous tip finally brought a Child Protective Services officer to Emily's doorstep. What they found shocked them. Empty bottles, filth, and two terrified toddlers clutching each other for comfort. Michael's phone rang as he swept floors in a diner. His heart stopped. "We're reopening the custody case," the voice on the line said. For the first time in months, Michael smiled through tears. The chance he had fought for had finally come. The courtroom would decide everything. The day of the hearing arrived. Emily arrived with a cheap lawyer, looking confident. Michael stood alone but proud. Child Protective Services presented the evidence. The neglect, the dirty apartment, the frightened children. Photos silenced the courtroom. Margaret testified to Michael's relentless devotion. Then, unexpectedly, Ethan was called to the stand. "Emily used me," he confessed bitterly. "She abandoned Michael and their children for money." The judge gazed coldly at Emily, who shifted uncomfortably under the weight of her own choices. With firm finality, the gavel struck. Full custody granted to Michael Turner. Tears streamed down Michael's face as Hannah and Grace ran to him, their tiny arms encircling his neck. The impossible had happened, but just as he began to breathe again, a stranger waited outside the courthouse. The man introduced himself as Mr. Sullivan from the Oakwood Foundation. He had heard of Michael's case and was inspired. "We help single fathers rebuild," Mr. Sullivan explained. "If you're willing to work hard, we'll give you a fresh start." Michael was wary, but desperation and hope pushed him to accept. Within days, he had an apartment, childcare assistance, and even a spot in a mechanic training program. Michael threw himself into the opportunity. Slowly, the fog lifted. The twins smiled more often. They played in safe parks, giggled at bedtime stories, and clung lovingly to their father. For the first time in years, Michael tasted stability. Emily, however, spiraled. Without Ethan or Michael, her world crumbled. Still, she had one more card to play, and she wasn't finished trying to reclaim what she had thrown away. It happened late one evening. Michael opened his door to find Emily, thin, desperate, makeup streaked with tears. "I've changed, Michael. Please, I want to see my girls," she whispered. Michael stood firm, arms crossed, protective. "You left. They're safe now." Emily sobbed, dropping to her knees. "I'll go to court," she threatened. For weeks, Michael lived in dread. A single court decision could destroy everything he had rebuilt. But when Emily filed for visitation rights, the judge saw through her desperation. "You have no legal standing," the judge declared. Michael hugged Hannah and Grace tightly as they walked out of the courthouse. The nightmare was over. Michael's hard work at the garage didn't go unnoticed. One day, an elegant businessman named Mr. Thompson approached. "I own a fleet of delivery trucks," Mr. Thompson said. "I need a manager with integrity. The job is yours if you want it." The offer felt surreal. Michael accepted, and life transformed again. He moved to a small, safe house with a little yard. The girls went to preschool. He bought a beat-up minivan and drove them to the beach on weekends. For the first time, laughter filled their home. Michael's story spread across the city. The local newspaper called him the dad who never gave up. Emily read the article alone in a shelter, her heart heavy with regret. Her fall was complete, but the world had one more twist waiting for Michael. Emily's life unraveled completely. Abandoned by friends and penniless, she drifted from shelter to shelter. One stormy night, she was found unconscious in an alley. The hospital couldn't save her. Emily passed away quietly, a shell of the woman she once was. Michael was informed but felt no hatred, only sorrow. At home, he gently told Hannah and Grace, "Your mother made some bad choices, but she loved you in her way." The girls were too young to understand, but they nodded solemnly and hugged him tighter. Michael vowed never to let them experience that kind of pain again. Time softened Michael's scars. At a school event, he met Sarah, a warm and kind teacher from Toronto. She had heard his story and admired his strength. Their conversations blossomed into friendship, then into something deeper. Sarah adored Hannah and Grace, and they adored her back. Slowly, Michael allowed himself to believe in happiness again. One spring evening at the park, where he once wandered with his daughters as a broken man, Michael knelt down and held out a simple ring. "Sarah, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Yes." The family he had fought so hard for was finally whole. The sun streamed through the windows of the small church. Michael stood at the altar with Hannah and Grace beside him, dressed in matching white dresses. As the doors opened, Sarah appeared, radiant, with Margaret proudly escorting her down the aisle. Margaret smiled through happy tears, having stood by Michael when no one else would. The vows were simple but powerful. Michael looked into Sarah's eyes and whispered, "We made it." The guests applauded as the couple kissed. Laughter and music filled the air. Hannah and Grace twirled around the dance floor, giggling with pure joy. Michael glanced around, knowing that from the streets of despair to this perfect moment, his journey had come full circle. Against all odds, he had given his daughters the life they deserved, and at last, the man who had once lost everything had gained everything that truly mattered. The moral lesson of his story is that true strength is not measured by wealth or comfort, but by a parent's unwavering love and sacrifice for their children, even in the hardest of times.